All right, folks, we should be live on Twitch now. Uh, Myself and Shane from Pinnacle Development are here with some of the wonderful developers from Alcat Games. You're probably hearing about all of us right now because we're all working on different things with Pathfinder. So today we're going to be talking about what it's like on our side, working on the paper side of the games industry, and what it's like working on the digital side of the industry with the folks over at Alcat. Make sure we are going to be taking questions over this live stream. So if you have questions, start popping them in the chat. When we get to the Q&A, we will start answering as many as we can. So first off, you need to know who we are. And so I'd love to start off with our wonderful guests from Alcat introducing themselves.
Hi, Alcat here, Arseny and Lisa. I'm a narrative designer.
And I'm a community manager.
And we're here to tell you about Wrath of the Righteous and the digital part of bringing the wonderful world of Golarion to you.
I'm Donald. Excuse me. I'm Donald Schepis. I'm a developer at Pinnacle Entertainment Games. I'm one of the folks. If you're in the comments for a Kickstarter, you've probably seen me answering questions. I also help out with the Savage Pathfinder development team.
Hi, everybody. Здравствуйте to our Russian friends. I'm Shane Hensley. I run Pinnacle, and I have a background in both video games and the pen and paper industry, going back longer than Lisa has been alive.
That's right.
That's true for most folks working in these industries, I think. So, like we said, we are going to be taking questions. So start dropping those in the chat right now. If you want to talk about the paper stuff, you want to talk about the pixel stuff, everything is going to be live fire. We obviously are all super excited about the things that we're working on, so we want to talk about that a little bit. And the Alcat folks have some amazing trailers to show off, so we'll jump into those in just a minute. Why don't Shane, you start with talking about what Savage Pathfinder is and how we got there.
Sure, and then I actually have a question for our Alcat friends as well. So Savage Pathfinder is the Savage Worlds conversion of the Pathfinder adventure paths. So we didn't set out to translate the system. If you like Pathfinder, play Pathfinder. I like it and I play it. But if you want to play their fantastic adventure paths as like Rise of the Rune Lords, which is what we're starting with, and you're a fan of Savage Worlds, this is your place to do it with the official translation and conversion and how we envision that kind of thing playing out with our kind of wilder game system. So that was our mission statement. I got excited about it a few years ago when Eric, Mona, and I were at a convention in France. We were running games beside each other, and I thought, this would be great for our fans to have these huge, fully developed, immersive adventure paths that they do. We don't tend to do that kind of thing. We have a little bit more sandbox approach with our plot point campaigns. And a few years later, we were in a position to make a proposal to them. I did, and they were generous enough to let us play in their sandbox. So here we are, and I have lots to say about how we actually went about that conversion and what challenges we faced and so forth, if anyone's interested in that. I have a question for you, for our Alcat friends, Arseny, Elisa. So I worked on Neverwinter for Dungeons & Dragons during 4th edition. And Neverwinter Online, it's a big MMO, massively multiplayer online game. And certainly one of the challenges we had was trying to make the system from the pen and paper RPG familiar to our MMO customers, right? And I have played Kingmaker that you made, and it is a pretty literal translation of Pathfinder. Did you consider other ways to go, or did you want to make, you wanted to give that pen and paper experience to gamers, or what went into that process for you?
Okay, so first of all, as a narrative designer, I have only limited scope on the technical parts. But our mission statement was really to bring the not just to make a video game that is good by itself, but a video game that translates that that unique pen and paper RPG flavor to the computer, like the older games like Baldur's Gate did. So yes, our idea was to try and bring some of the hallmarks of the Pathfinder experience, and not always was it good because, for example, a hallmark Pathfinder experience is being low level and being completely eviscerated by a swarm of enemies. We did that, and our players were not happy, and we had to adjust a lot of it. Then we
You always need to find that balance.
yes, then we changed the approach because you see, the problem with strict mathematical rules is that when you, even Gary Gygax said that, please, if you need it for the story, fudge the rolls, fudge them. Computer doesn't do that.
Right.
So when you take the strict rules of the tabletop system and translate it as is, as written, to a computer game, you get an experience of playing with an unforgiving DM.
Right.
An unforgiving DM, maybe even a sadistic DM who's out to kill you.
Right.
So working from this experience, we right now in the new game that we are developing now, we have learned from our past both mistakes and happy little accidents. And right now, core rules is second to the hardest difficulty.
Okay.
The normal difficulty, it is not, well, it doesn't dumb the system down. It doesn't make it exceedingly simple to play. It just adjusts for the fact that on a tabletop, maybe, just maybe, your DM wouldn't want to murder your whole party in a certain situation.
Well, I find that fascinating. I've been doing this for quite a while, and my video game mentor is a man named Chuck Krogel, and he was one of the founders of SSI, or Strategic Simulations Incorporated. You may have heard of the classic Gold Box Dungeons and Dragons games. They made those, and watching. Pardon?
I played those.
Yeah, so Pool of Radiance. What was the other one? Amber something?
Shekels, Crimson Shekels, I think.
Uh,
Azure Shekels.
Azure Shekels, that's, yeah. Curse of the Azure Bonds. That's it. Yeah, so watching those games, which were also literal translations of Dungeons and Dragons for the time, work up through games like the original Neverwinter Nights and Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate, now to see games like Kingmaker, which are fairly literal, but as you say, with some of the best features of computer games to help smooth over some of those rough spots. And I find that, as a designer and someone who's worked on projects like that myself, I find that particularly fascinating. And with Kingmaker, there were definitely some times where I wish I could bribe the GM to be a little nicer to me, because it was pretty tough, which was great.
I think also one of the things that's so amazing about what you folks are doing is, you can't beat visual fidelity in video games, right? You have so much control over how everything looks. You don't have to worry about, are the players imagining this as cool as I have it in my head? And to that point, I think this is a great time to show off your combat gameplay trailer. And there's something I want to say after after everybody gets to see it. So we'll go ahead and roll that right now.
This city was doomed. With the seeds of evil sown long before it fell, Knobris ended up in flames. Those who survived were left to face an even worse fate. We have a glimmer of hope. A gift of tremendous power has been given to one of us. One who has become a leader, united us, and given us the strength to fight back. Nothing will keep us from victory now. The question is, what will become of us when we finally win?
That was incredible.
So I have never regretted so far the decision to jump from digital to physical games until I saw your folks' trailer.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful, and it's so impressive to me, the fidelity, and like, I mean, trailers are awesome because they hype you up, but I've worked in Unity a lot, and we never got our games looking half as good as you folks are getting Righteous, and it is just a treat to see, especially with so many different characters and settings that I know from Pathfinder. It's one of those things where sometimes you see the translation, you see the book, the movie version or the TV show version, you're like, oh, that doesn't quite line up with what was in my head. And everywhere I'm looking at the stuff that you folks are doing, you're making it way cooler than anything I ever imagined. So I'm super excited for it.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Actually, we had a significant graphics update. If
From
we
the
can
Kingmaker,
compare,
yes.
yeah, if we compare Kingmaker. But you've been talking before about the graphics and how it is. Excuse me. Before we watched the trailer, you said that there is a good thing in games that you have graphics. You actually don't need to have all in your head, but we've tried to have this element in our games too.
Oh yes.
And I like this one actually. I thought you would.
Oh yes. I just wanted to say that. Of course, pretty graphics are great, but one thing that I think we'll love about tabletop games is when you're doing the theater of the mind, you can make up anything and make it be awesome with just your words. And when you then try to translate it into a game, when you say things like, well, here we have 1,000 soldiers marching through a huge forest, things like that are hard to do. And there's a bit of theater of the mind, but in both Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous, an idea we picked up from our colleagues at Obsidian. They're so-called
Book events.
book events. Yes, book events. Some things that just would not work graphically. We put them into tiny choose-your-own-adventure style.
In an actual book.
Yeah.
I think that's great, and I think you're right. I think one of the great things about modern games and what you have done really embraces this is we can inspire people with the incredible graphics and the big effects as we saw in your trailer. And I think just like watching movies or amazing TV shows like Game of Thrones or whatever, we start to get kind of a common language in our mind and see these things, so that when you do a book event, it enables people who haven't been immersed in that sort of gaming or literature or art to see it better, right? I think there are some amazing games out there that do this very thing. There's a little whaling game called Nantucket that just moves little ships around the map, but the way that it describes the hunt for whales and so forth is so graphic and immersive. It's incredible. There is a game I'm playing right now, the Life and Times of Sir Brant, I think it is. And it is just a book with static illustrations, but it's so immersive because you live this life from birth to death. There's hardly any effects or animation or anything, but it's amazing. So I understand exactly what you're saying. And as a guy who's lived in both worlds, it is a whole lot cheaper for us to write a scene than it is for you to make a scene.
Yeah, and we also don't have to go in and make the AI. Some other folks raised that AI for 18 to 30 years, and that we didn't have to code it for that long.
Okay, but what if it's terrible?
Well, but nobody blames us if our AI is terrible.
Makes sense. I want to say that I'm a bit younger than you, and I grew up with the medium itself. I started with the ZX Spectrum games, with text adventures like Hobbit, with monochrome games like Dynamite Den, and I grew up seeing the graphics becoming prettier and prettier and prettier, and at some point they just hit a moment where the point of diminishing returns, I think.
I agree.
Somewhere around the beginning of PlayStation 3 era, I think. All the incredible amounts of money and effort that go into making graphics prettier don't really do much to make it more powerful for our minds. I remember how powerful it already was when it was monochrome. One of the most immersive games I can remember is, Albion by Blue Byte.
Sure.
Mostly forgotten now, but it was incredible how with just pixel graphics and pretty primitive sprites and incredible sound design, they created that world that just enveloped you. And personally, even though I would never badmouth our colleagues who work in the graphic departments, I wish that we paid more attention to gaming systems, to rules, to making the games bigger and deeper and more immersive, not just visually prettier.
Well, that comes with that whole you're a narrative designer, right? Designers always love gameplay and rules first, right?
Well,
So
I guess that's why I merge all these things together. I've been a writer on video games. I've been an executive producer. I've been a tabletop writer for a long time. So to me, when I said earlier, it gives us a common language. When I'm writing a scene, I think about the games I've played, the movies I've watched, the books I've read, and all these different mediums come together to give me, so many more tools than I had, when I was younger and played these games. But you're absolutely right, Arseny, that when I was young and I played games like Wizard's Crown, also from SSI, which had, monochrome 8-bit graphics, it was one of the most immersive and exciting games I ever played. And all the details were in my head. That said, that trailer made me want to play your game.
Thank you.
So-
Speaking of, I'm sorry.
I was just say, speaking of history, and you growing up with the medium, I think we can go around real quick and just talk about how we got to the places that we are, and then we'll start grabbing questions from chat and answering those. So, folks, if you have questions, start dropping them in now. We're creating a list of questions just as you throw them. So even if you put it in now, we'll still probably get to it when we get to the Q&A. So make sure to drop in your questions now. But you were going to say before I suggested the background thing.
Oh, speaking of history, I just wanted to say a big thank you because Savage Worlds was a system that was and is very dear for me. For years and years, it has been my to-go system for like any adventure that I made. I have played a campaign of played and DM'd Savage. I'm sorry, Deadlands.
I believe we've started with it actually.
No. We started with Age of Aquarius.
Oh,
Uh,
no. I don't mean it. I mean that we've started exploring Savage Worlds with
yes,
Deadlands.
yes. And I really loved how it was. You see, there's
And I
3
also-
points in tabletop RPG design, 2 of which are great and 1 is terrible. The 2 great points are story and gameism, so-called. So you can make a game that facilitates telling a great story, or you make a game that plays like a good board game. And the third terrible pole, which I believe nobody should pay any attention to because it makes for terrible games, cancel me for that, is simulationism. As someone who has made a terrible RPG system myself, I believe
You
that
need to start
for
with
any
something.
for any element of your game, the question should be either does it make the game more fun, or does it help us tell better stories? If the question is does it make it more realistic, drop it, drop it. And that's why I love Savage Worlds, because it takes that sweet spot right between, on one hand, really story-heavy games like uh,
Fate.
Fate, yes, like Blades in the Dark that I've played a lot in recent years, which they don't give a good board gaming experience. Uh, they help tell great stories, but they are also very demanding. You can't just kick back and kill some monsters. No, you have to be on your toes all the time. You need to be in your creative mode. And on the other hand, there's Pathfinder, and I troll people by saying that Pathfinder is not an RPG system. Pathfinder is a skirmish war game. It's true. It's true. Pathfinder.
Are you allowed to talk like that?
No, I'm not, but I still do. It comes from the chainmail system, and it brings all the legacy of the. But it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just that it is a game that, if you are not in the mood of role playing, of being in character, of being dramatic, you still can have that experience by kicking back and just rolling some dice, participating in this purely board game experience.
But also with that, I'm actually in love with Pathfinder lore and
Oh, yes.
the world itself. It's so
And
detailed. So,
so-
there is a good world to dive in and to role play if you want to.
Yes, the
Well, and
lore
that-
is. So I just wanted to say again, thanks a lot. I love Savage Worlds because it's good. It's just in the middle. It is simple enough that you can purely use it for theater of the mind kind of games, and it's still rules heavy enough that you can have some dungeon crawling with it. which
Well,
you couldn't have.
spasiba, Arseny. That was very, very kind of you, and I'm humbled by it. May I ask, do you when you buy it, do you get it in English or do you buy the Studio 101 version that Alexander does?
I have. Oh, it's a really mixed. Well, right now, I'm actually starting a homebrew campaign, and my Studio 101 version is the outdated one.
Ah,
The
the Explorers.
Yes, the Explorers.
Yeah.
So I bought the deluxe edition.
Okay.
in English, digital one.
Got it.
That's
Well,
the other
we're
thing that we lose in physical games. It's way easier for you guys to update your game, and everybody gets the updated copy.
right.
Well, oh, by the way, I have already backed your Kickstarter campaign.
Oh, well,
Everybody
thank
do
you.
it right. Everybody who's
Stop
listening
watching
us,
and do it right
yes,
now.
do it right now. They're great.
Well, thank you very much. Dinner is on you tonight. I appreciate it.
So we were talking a little bit about history, and I mean, we've got a lot of history to get through with Shane, so maybe he should go first and just give the audience a brief, as brief as somebody who's had as prolific a career as you can, a brief history of how you got into digital games and physical games and what that journey was like.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible. So in 1986, I went to college. I was a poor college student, didn't have a lot of money. So me and some friends, we played a lot of games. We decided to open a game store. That got me in touch with different people. I went to several conventions like Gen Con and Origins and so forth. And I started doing professional writing with a game called Torg from West End Games. And I used to make a big deal of our Halloween adventure each year. So I wrote up my Halloween adventure. I sent it in to them. They were accepting submissions at the time. And miracle of miracles, they decided to publish and accept it. So I kept working for West End Games for a while. I eventually started working for, as a freelancer, FASA, White Wolf, and then eventually TSR, where I got to work on Dark Sun, which is one of my favorite settings of all time. And I also I made my own computer games in high school. I used to program in assembly and type in the little numbers, all night long. And so there was a 4-H game. 4-H is a educational program in the United States that tends to focus on agriculture, but it does other things as well. And they made a computer game, and I got to design it and oversee that project. And then a few years later, 2 freelancers that I had hired to work on Deadlands Hell on Earth made a computer game called City of Heroes. And one of them, Jack Emmert, who's been my friend for many years now, said, well, Shane, you were one of the few people who paid us on time. So he offered me a job in California. I lived in Virginia at the time, and things were not good in the tabletop industry in about 2003, 2004. So I packed up, moved to California, and worked on City of Heroes and City of Villains. And I went from one of the lead writers to a lead designer, and then I started doing business development. And then I eventually became a studio head and an executive producer on Deadlands, the MMO, which was in the works here in Arizona. Then back to Cryptic for a while to work on Neverwinter, and then to Las Vegas to work on a big MMO RTS called End of Nations that was really amazing. Didn't come out, unfortunately. And then we made some private game with a very small group of guys here in Arizona where I live now called Zombie Pirates, which is still on Steam. I'm very proud of it. So that's the very short version of a lot of different things that I have been fortunate enough to do.
Have you worked on any of the Dark Sun computer games?
Did I work on them?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. So I mentioned Chuck Krogel earlier, who did the SSI Gold Box D&D games. They made those, and I played the heck out of them, loved them to death. Funny little incident. So they made Dark Sun Online, which was one of the first online games of its time. And if you recall, the invisibility spell in D20 doesn't go off until you attack someone, right? You stay invisible the whole time. So in the original Dark Sun Online, when you killed a monster, its loot would fall on the ground. And people couldn't figure out why suddenly all their loot would just disappear. There was a gang of invisible characters following around every new player, stealing all their loot.
Oh, the old games and the
Right.
ways
So
of
that-
griefing.
Right. That was the first griefing that I ever saw. It was great.
That's amazing.
So what about you, Arseny? How did you get to be a narrative designer at Alcat? What was the path that led you there?
Um, well, I started in the Mail.ru group in the Allods Online team, and Allods Online, it's a interesting game because it's an MMO version of world that it's been a big series here in Russia, but I don't think it had a lot of traction in America. The game known as Rage of Mages in America.
I've heard of it. Haven't played it.
Well, it was a big part of our industry, and the MMO version. I actually love the world of. I love the world of Allods Online. I loved it so much that I had a Savage Worlds based campaign, homebrew campaign set there.
You're my hero, Arseny.
I actually wanted to make a tabletop setting and offer it to Pinnacle. I was talking about that with the higher ups, but unfortunately, I had to leave that team. We still might make it, by the way, if you're interested.
Okay.
It's a really interesting world. It's a world of so-called mana punk.
Manapunk. Okay.
Yeah, it has two fractions. One of them, the League, is a fantasy Russia of old, with all the
Leshy, Baba Yaga.
yeah, Lesha
Oh.
and
And
Baba Yaga.
elves.
And
Ah.
For some reason.
Elves are the French.
Oh,
Elves are the French.
Okay.
That's a part of
Kinda.
Russian culture too. You see, French are the corpse.
Dobra.
as well as German.
And there is also the Empire. Empire is fantasy USSR
Okay.
with
Stalinsky was
yes,
so
yes,
cute.
yes, with a harsh totalitarian magocracy
And orcs.
and orcs, and it's amazing.
And it's
it's-
rather beautiful, actually.
Sounds great.
Unfortunately, it is only available as an MMO, and let's be honest, nobody plays MMO for the story, and it's a shame because we've poured a lot of heart into it. I really hope to one day see this setting. I really hope to see the setting one day, well, outside of the MMO and maybe somewhere else.
Yeah.
Narrative designer stalking.
Yes. Then I moved on to another MMO game. It was called Skyforge. Unfortunately, I joined the team not at the best time for that game's history. Pretty soon, most of the team was let go, and just when it happened, like an angel from the sky, came our creative director and asked, "Hey, I heard you've lost your job recently. Would you like to work on a Pathfinder RPG?"
Yeah.
Well, that was fortunate.
It was really fortunate. And that's how
Fantastic.
I got into Kingmaker.
Okay.
And what about you, Liza?
Well, I'm. You cannot say I'm a developer. So.
Oh
Oh,
no,
you're part of the team, of course.
you're 100%.
You're part of the team.
developer.
Yep.
Though I had a moment when I tried to jump into the narrative design. I've tried my skills, but it didn't happen. Not in all cats. And I've while we've been developing Kingmaker, I've been helping as a technical editor of Russian and English localizations. But I'm a community manager, and logically, it happened after some years of being an internal communications specialist.
Okay.
at some other companies not connected with game development. So
Okay.
for me, journalistics and internal communications and all such things. I've never thought I would end up in game development, and it was like a dream come true. I've never
But
thought
here you
would
are.
happen. So I still don't quite understand how all the stars
Aligned.
put alliance.
Mhm.
Yeah. So here, but
Yes.
here am I.
There are some
And
situations you just find yourself in.
yeah,
That's right.
that's the flow. At some point, OwlCats needed a community manager, and I was there, and my job as a technical editor ended. So hey, I've been suggested, hey, would you like to try? And I tried, and I sucked in, and I stayed here, and I think that's great job. I love it really much, but I actually don't have much more experience in game development companies.
Well, this is your start.
Though, of course, I've been playing through all my life.
Mm.
Not so
Fantastic.
much to tell you about.
I have been DMing her for
Well, he's my brother, actually.
yes, actually, for over a decade, I think now.
Yes, my first DM.
Yep.
Yep.
That's amazing.
That's great.
Can I ask something about your take on Pathfinder?
Sure. Let's hear from Don real quick, though,
Oh,
so we don't forget him.
I'm not too impressive. I went to college I got a degree in game design. I worked in mobile games for a number of years, a lot of like educational games for kids and things like that. Managed a team for a while. Basically, I was a designer, but I worked as a producer a lot because when you don't have a dedicated producer, somebody ends up the producer, and I was that one. But then I started teaching at the university I graduated from some years later, and actually one of my now coworkers had worked with Shane and Simon, a bunch of other folks when they were at Cheyenne Mountain Studios, and he was like, "Hey, they've got this position I think you'd be great for. Why don't you go and talk to them?" And a year later, Shane was like, "Hey, you're doing some great work for us. Do you want to come on board?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah,
So-
Don's a professor here at one of our local, essentially a computer game college. That's how I see it. So we hired several
that is
programmers from
That's
there.
fantastic.
that is the big portion of what UAP
Yeah.
does, and it's a dream come true working with Shane and the folks at Pinnacle on Savage Worlds. But
Well,
so
we'll
you had
fix that. Arseny, what was your question?
So yes, I have a question. I said that Savage Worlds have been my to-go system for any game, homebrew or published for years, and recently, just before the pandemic started, I've DM'd a homebrew campaign for Lisa and some other friends, and I've run into something that I thought of as as a limit that Savage Worlds has as a system. Here's what I ran into. I tried to make exploration game, a story light game where you just explore a map and find places and fight enemies and crawl dungeons and also upgrade your gear. Actually, I did it right after we finished Kingmaker, and I wanted to try to do the Kingmaker experience, but less math heavy. Not in Pathfinder, but in Savage Worlds. And honestly, we stopped playing because of the pandemic. But at that point, the players told me they didn't feel it, but I felt that it was crumbling. It was completely crumbling because Savage Worlds is it's not a number goes up type of system. Yes, you have some some development. And by the way, I love how in the newest version of the game you abandon the experience system and just encourage DMs to give players advances right away. But thing is, the difference between a newbie and a legendary character in Savage Worlds is not that great. You don't go up to the legendary levels of what you do in Pathfinder. In Pathfinder, each level, each step is tremendous. You end up as monsters who can take on whole armies. Where in Savage Worlds, you start as a guy who can beat one person in a brawl, and as a hero, you can take on the whole tavern maybe. So my attempt to make that game where you find items and upgrade your items and get new powers, turns out Savage Worlds just doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
So
it's
how
not
you
built.
run in that when trying to translate Pathfinder into Savage Worlds?
Yeah, I'd say that is definitely one of the challenges that we're facing, because D20 games, much like a lot of the computer games I work on, are loot games, right? So they're
Yes,
all
yes.
about finding the next treasure and adding it in. And
You want to fight, here's your +1 thing.
right. And let me see if I can boil down a very complex and long discussion into something fairly simple. So when we're doing a leveling chart for an MMO, for example, your character starts on this may not look right on a video. Your character starts here and moves at this kind of angle up the power curve, right? And so do the monsters. So if you're going at this level, so are the things that you fight, right? You're leveling together. And what you're looking for as a player are little rises in your power level that give you an advantage over the monsters that you're fighting, right? And that's what makes you feel powerful for a little while. And then the +2 sword is no good anymore. Now you need a +3 sword. Now the +3 is no good. Now I need a +4, right? Orcs are long in our past. We can't fight orcs anymore because they're just not dangerous. So as developers on a computer game and in tabletop, we make savage orcs or orcs of the red hand or whatever that are bigger, badder orcs that can give you the same Lord of the Rings trope, because that's what it all comes back to, at a higher level, right? Savage Worlds isn't designed that way. It is designed almost to be more like real life, where in a cinematic way. So you have more abilities and can do more things, but a goblin with a dagger can still kill a legendary character, right? So that is fundamental to the savage part of Savage Worlds, is that you can never be safe. That said, a heroic level character, assuming you're built for combat, we want you to wade into a horde of undead or screaming goblins and look like a Frazetta painting, right? You should be standing there among, the piles of the horrible undead and zombies and skeletons that you fought. But they can overwhelm you, they can kill you, and that is essential to a philosophy of the game. And it's one of the reasons why we don't have challenge levels, for example. We prefer to say, here's what exists in the world. You deal with it however you think you can handle it. So maybe you can walk into the orc camp and take them all on and fight them, and maybe you'll be victorious. But probably you're going to need a clever plan, and you're going to need to get allies, and you're going to need to use your leadership edges to go accumulate an army to help you fight. Or you're going to need to get a powerful ritual or whatever, right? So what we see as the big difference is, one is an emphasis on gaining and gathering loot, and the other is more of a story-based milestone approach. So in translating Savage Pathfinder, to bring this all back in Rise of the Rune Lords, we do a couple of things. First off, we have milestone rewards, so we tell you when to level throughout the adventure. So you're gonna be whatever rank in Savage Worlds levels. We're gonna be whatever rank we want you to be at that point in the adventure. Okay, and then I think for magic items, Rise of the Rune Lords is actually pretty good on this already. It doesn't really throw a whole lot of, you know, sword +1, dagger +2 kind of loot at you. They tend to be more focused. They have a particular reason to exist in the game, or they help a magic user be a little bit tougher or something like that. So we haven't had to really change much of that in Rise of the Rune Lords. If you're playing your own homebrew campaign, you would just want to be a little less heavy on the magic items, because if you give so a great example, this didn't take magic items, but Don was exploiting some rules last night and really schooled us on something. He made a monk with a multi-class sorcerer class edge that gave him scaly skin. He took bruiser and brawler and all the things he could do to get his toughness up, and he was toughness 20 at in a fight last night. So, you know, that was something we had to look at a little bit and pull back on. So that long answer is to say, I think if you wanted to do a Forbidden Lands type campaign, which it sounds like what you were doing, Arseny, with the hex-based exploration, I would probably focus more on saving this kingdom, rescuing this adventure, rather than focused on gathering minor loot, right? Big loot, big story focus, not so much Rings of Protection +1 and, you know, crossbow +2.
All right, we also have some questions for chat. We've been promising to jump into those. So we'll start with from TRDG11. How might Savage Worlds work if it ever got a PC game?
We've had several proposals through the years, and generally what they want to do, and I've done all different versions in video game development. For example, in Neverwinter Online, which was 4th edition D&D, we had abilities that were named the same as abilities in 4th edition, but that worked differently just because of the way our underlying numbers worked, and largely due to what Arseny just pointed out. We need a very granular scale of numbers, right? So rather than a +1 to +5 sword, we really need like plus, you know, 0.01 to 0.500 or something, right? The way the spreadsheets and the underlying math work get pretty weird. So I think it probably depends on the depth and length of the game you want. If you want something as deep as what Alcat has done with Kingmaker, you might want to do the same kind of approach where you, rather than going from a D4 fighting to a D6 fighting, you know, maybe it's more granular in between them before you finally, you know, flip the die over to the next type, or you might just want to abstract it completely. For a lighter game like a Curious Expedition kind of thing that was based on Savage Worlds, you know, I would just theme the system. But I certainly don't think there's anything wrong with a direct translation. I would love to see 50 Fathoms or the Ripper's Resurrected campaign, for example, done exactly as Alcat has done Pathfinder, you know, as close to the original system as possible.
Another question from TRDG11. Would it be easier or harder if your next PC game would be based on Pathfinder 2nd edition instead of Pathfinder 1st edition?
Well, of course it would be way harder. We have already spent 2 games making computer version of Pathfinder 1 work, and now we would have to discard it all and start from scratch making Pathfinder 2. Of course, it would be way harder. Well, I can't say if it would be more difficult. I'm, again, not a mechanics person, but it would absolutely be, well, costly.
Yeah, because you have to basically do everything you did on Kingmaker over again for the new system. Something that I've always found to be very true in digital games is the second game you make is the one you're most proud of if you're doing it in a series, because you go through that process of figuring how do we even get this game out the door? Like, how do we solve all these issues? How do we make it fun? How do we, like you said, be able to render all of the characters that we need on screen? You figure out all the solutions at the end of the first game, and you're like, well, if we could can we just do that over again? Because we now know way more at the end than we did at the beginning. So let's just go and do another one real quick.
Well, it's not so quick.
Well, yeah.
It's curious thing. For some members of the team, it might be like that. But for me, story-wise, Wrath is a huge step up in difficulty.
Right.
Compared to what we're doing in Wrath, Kingmaker was a cakewalk, and it wasn't a cakewalk when we were doing it. You see, story-wise,
Kingmaker just allows us to do that bigger, better.
well, yes. What I'm trying to say is that at the beginning we were talking about the aspects of the tabletop gaming that can be translated into the CRPG experience, and here we tried something really ambitious with the mythic systems. To put it shortly, at a certain point, your character gets a mythic path, which brings them to have godly powers. And the thing is, what we tried to emulate there is that the mythic path that you choose, it not only it does change the way story works, it actually changes the how do you put it? Changes the genre you're in. I jokingly call it there is one straight path of the angelic, the angel path, and others are way to derail it. What I mean is, when you play tabletop game, at certain point, someone might just go crazy loony. Oh, I throw a fish at them. Well, for that we have trickster path, which is actually a complete derailment of the whole plot. You might get stupidly evil characters who say, well, I just kill everybody. I just go and kill everybody. Well, we have a path just for that. A path where you end up killing literally everybody. It's not easy to get, it's not easy to play, but if you want to play an omnicidal maniac, here's your path.
That's a lot of content.
Yeah. If you want it to be dark fantasy, go Lich. If you want it to be light-hearted, maybe less grim, dark, and more fluffy adventure, go Azata. If you want it to be high pathos and heroism, go Angel. It really changes the whole flavor of the game. And when I learned that our second game is going to be Wrath of the Righteous, I said, well, it's impossible. It's an impossible game to make. It's an impossible game. Well, I still believe that we're making an impossible game right now. We're almost finished, and I have no idea how we did what we did.
That is always
At the end.
yeah, that's the weird thing about working on video games is you stand in the wreckage of however many years of development, and you look and there's a game there and people are playing it, and you're like, how did that actually get out the door? Like,
Who
like
made that?
yeah, 2 weeks ago we were convinced that the game was never going to work because there was a problem in the renderer we just encountered, or wait a minute, how do we just realized that we designed all this stuff early on, and it's been 3 years since we worked on that, and now the mid game doesn't make any sense with that. How do we fix all that in 6 months before release?
Too, Arseny, you're talking about so much content and how difficult it is to make that game. One of my early experiences was how difficult it was to get my ideas, into computer format, right? Because it was just so hard. The technology wasn't there at the time. Near the end of my last video game, usually the programmers wanted more of a challenge. because the technology had advanced so far, and they said, well, you need to ask for more. And I had to realize, okay, things have changed. And I think, maybe Wrath of the Righteous is benefiting, from that as well.
Yes. Speaking of more content, I have another question about your take on Rise of the Rune Lords. You said that when playing a fantasy campaign with Savage Worlds, you'll have to stick to plot points and more story-wise rewards. However, without that skirmish war gamey, board gamey kind of experience, I feel like you trying to translate this adventure path to your system. You run into the fact that you can't just throw a dungeon at the players. Well, I'm not saying that making a cool dungeon is easy. Of course, it's not. But it's a tool in here that I feel like not in your toolbox anymore. So, for example, but I'm right now I'm playing through with another party. I'm playing through the Rune Lords campaign. We have just finished the 4th book, and well, there was a lot of dungeon crawling. And for example, that 4th book, not to spoil things, but there is a keep with some giants there. I imagine you wouldn't make your players just go and kill giants. You would have to put work into making up characters, right? Making plot points, making places, making ways to crawl maybe through the dungeon, maybe not even kill the last boss, but expose his dirty secret to his minions. So that sounds like a ton of narrative work you would have to do.
So yeah, so there's two things going on there. First off, one of our promises to Paizo, and wow, you like to ask the hard questions, Arseny. I love it. This is more fun for me. So one of our promises to Paizo is that we wouldn't change the story. Now, we can alter encounters and add more bad guys and the things that we need to do to make it fun in Savage Worlds. But one of the very obvious things that has popped up from both Hollow's Last Hope, the adventure, and all throughout Rise of the Rune Lords, D20 Pathfinder games are designed to slowly attrit or take away the party's hit points and resources, right? They're I'm trying to use language that won't be difficult to translate. They're ablative games, right? Your hit points get lower, your resources get lower. So even a small encounter that isn't dangerous will take away some of those hit points or resources, right? In Savage Worlds, we tend to favor larger set piece battles, right? Lots of
Savage Worlds, you either get damaged or you do not get damaged.
Right, and so there's very little point in having small encounters along the way, unless they're interaction, role playing, or story, right? Having a couple of goblins run out of the woods at you isn't going to do anything, most likely, right? So, for example, spoiler alert for those who haven't played Rise of the Rune Lords yet. When you go down into the bottom of the ogre cabin, there are a couple of rooms with individual ogres in them. At least this is how Mike ran them. I haven't read my copy of this in many years, but in Pathfinder, I think you would generally deal with these things kind of one at a time, and they might trigger and come out. But in ours, we definitely want them all to trigger at once, and they summon reinforcements, and it becomes this really nasty close quarters battle in the bottom of this cabin. Okay, so that's how we might change a Pathfinder encounter to a Savage World style encounter. It's very small, but
you still make it a combat encounter, but instead of slow dungeon crawling room by room, you make it an epic battle.
Exactly. And we found we do that throughout. And another good example is at the end of Hollow's Last Hope. What's the wolf's name, Don? Is it Greypelt?
Greypelt.
Okay, another spoiler alert. Um, the the creature at the end of Hollow's Last Hope is relatively dangerous for a party of first level to fourth level, third level characters. It is not dangerous to a party of Savage Worlds if you do characters, if you do a straight translation. So not only did we give it some additional abilities to make it a little tougher, but it also summons in a pack of wolves that you haven't seen before. It cries for help and they come rushing in from behind, right? So that encounter gets bigger and more visceral, more bloody, and kind of grabs you by the gut, right? It's a big deal. So those are the kinds of things we've done throughout Rise of the Rune Lords to make it feel more like Savage Worlds, which is good because, Pathfinder is awesome at what it does. We like to think we're good at what we do. So it's actually different experiences as well, even though it's the same story, same major beats, same major characters and monsters, but it's just a different experience. And I think they're both great experiences, just, vanilla and chocolate, or strawberry and chocolate. I don't want to say vanilla. Vanilla's plain.
Speaking of, well, kind of spoilers, I was talking about that last boss in the fourth book. In your version of the game, is it possible to sneak into the Giant's Keep and find out, big spoiler, the fact that the Lord of the Giants is not a sorcerer, but a wizard, and uses magic with books, which is a huge disgrace. And without even fighting, without even facing him, expose him to his underlings and make them revolt.
It is, and we haven't actually got there yet. So I don't know how our party's going to handle that. But
well, we've got Simon, so we know how we're going to handle it. We're going to kill him.
Probably. We've been trying to play it like we think a typical party would, rather than maybe how we might personally play it, because we want to, we're trying to test the scenarios. The character you're mentioning, I have only read about it. I haven't gotten that far myself, either in my previous games that I've played or in the campaign that we're playtesting right now. But that's absolutely the kind of thing that I think can happen. We'll see if it does.
See, that's why I left Savage Worlds.
Well, and you can do that in Pathfinder too. And it's how you run it.
I don't think so. You see, when I'm saying that Pathfinder is more of a skirmish war game than a RPG game.
I think that's how you run it, because I run Pathfinder pretty narratively.
I don't run Pathfinder. I play Pathfinder.
Well, I do.
Well, but that's your GM, because
system, see, the system itself, the way the system itself works, is it gives you this lots and lots and lots of cool options for combat. You can chop or burn or slice or impale or shoot your enemies. And you also kinda can get some non-combat skills. Dork.
Well, that might be a community thing, but I'm going to disagree with you on this one, Arseny. I play. Yeah, I mean, our system has. I get questions about Savage Worlds, people saying they want more rules for social conflict as well, and I haven't. We have social conflict as a subsystem, but generally, to me, that's the role playing aspect of it, and that's a little tricky because I might be playing a very charismatic, well-spoken character when I, in real life, am not, right? So you have to adjust for that to some degree in the game, and I think both game systems do that. But to me, a good game master is going to let you do cool, clever, creative stuff and find a way to make the system work for it. We've built some things in. I think Pathfinder has built some things in. I took a lot of inspiration from Torg in our non-combat interactions, and Torg, I think, is probably the best game ever for I can be a face guy, a guy who talks to people and gets them to do things, and be super effective in combat. And Torg is just, I think hands down, it's the best game that ever did that. And we have some of that that I stole and made our own version of for Savage Worlds. But I think I would use all kinds of tricks like that in Pathfinder as well, and have. So I think that's a game master thing. You need a better game master. I'll come over and we'll play some together.
Well, look, is that an invitation?
Absolutely.
Well, you see, of course, it's a question of the specific party, but as a game master, you have certain tools, and your system is your tool. And in some situation, you feel like you're holding a drill and trying to bang in a nail with a drill.
Well, I think that's in any game, ours as well. So
And you absolutely can have beautiful social role playing in Pathfinder, but the system wouldn't help you a lot. When, for example, in Blades in the Dark, they have combat, but they do not have a dedicated combat system.
right.
They have a system of having problems and overcoming problems with getting consequences for that. And combat is just one kind of problem you can overcome with
Right.
that. And that's because, and that's why you wouldn't use it for a dungeon crawl, because it's not built for that.
See, this is the part where I know you're
That's
a
why we
narrative
have different
designer.
systems. Of course, you can. I'm sorry. Of course, you can homebrew Pathfinder until it is Blades in the Dark, but
Well, you're such a perfect narrative designer. You're coming from it that we put our because we have to be all kinds of designers in one, and so when we put our systems design hats on, it's a lot of. You're absolutely right in that depending on the system, what it tells you on the box, that's the default experience, right? That's the experience that you don't have to think much past what the rules present in order to get those experiences, because that's the fantasy that they're selling, right? It shouldn't be a controversial thing to say Pathfinder is a game about kicking down doors and killing monsters. But all of the systems that they have in place for combat, you can also apply to social and to exploration, and the tools are there. It's just about thinking about it in a different way, right? And that's kind of it's the opposite of what you folks are doing in Wrath, right? You've got all these different, take this path and you're going to have this flavor of gameplay, and you've got all those, and you yourself have described how that feels like this impossible task to accomplish, though you folks are so far doing a great job at it. That's kind of the same thing. We'll tell you on the box what the experience is. It's just we don't have to build in everything for you in a TTRPG space. We can let you build out all your other tools using the principles that we already set down. And that's something that we're constantly doing when we're working on Rise of the Rulers for Savage Worlds. And it's one of those things that we luck out and don't have to. I call it punting. When we've got the tool set there, the GM can figure out how do I apply it in this situation, right? We don't have to write it out for exactly how you do it, because the GM can just do it. Unlike when you're in digital, if we didn't put it in the game, you can't do it. So we got another question from TRDG11, and I'm before you answer this, I want to guess, because I'm almost certain I know what the answer is. Might future DLCs for Wrath make the game longer, comparable to King? I'm hoping. I know it's too early to tell, but so I'm going to guess your answer for that is the same answer that we have when folks ask, "What other adventure paths are you doing? Are you going to do this other thing? Can we get the first one done first? That's hard enough, and then we'll worry about later stuff."
yeah, exactly. Well, there's another layer to that, because you see, in this dumb industry, the word DLC has somewhat of a dirty meaning, because when people hear DLC, some of them think, well, they're chopping off parts of complete experience to sell it separately.
We sometimes get these opinions.
this is something we have to deal with because, well, some other companies have kind of poisoned the well here. So the answer is, honestly, we're not even thinking right now about the next adventure path. Just no. And speaking of DLC, we're barely talking what it might be. There's no work on DLC being done right now. We have a hands full with Wrath.
I think DLC is becoming much more acceptable, certainly here in the US, as people understand a bit more just how much work goes into all of this and how expensive it is to make anything.
I'll be cynical here and say that DLC is becoming more acceptable because those predatory companies have moved to other, more predatory ways of monetization and left the DLCs alone.
So for
Now they
folks
have
in
loot
chat,
boxes.
for folks in chat, just to kind of from an inside perspective, right? So DLC fits in a couple of different boxes for how they might come about, right? So there's some DLC that is, hey, we've got to get this game out. We've got 6 months left on the game, and this system that we've been working on isn't really ready for prime time, or this content, this level, whatever it might be, right? It's something we love it, we want to finish it, but if we want to get the game out so that you can play it, we're going to have to cut it. Some DLC comes from that of, let's take that thing that we didn't have enough time and resources to get into the base game. Let's work on it after the fact and then release it, right? And that's where you see a lot of, like a problem, especially in like the mid 2000s, was, oh, some of the DLC is already on the disc. Yeah, because it was content we cut, so it was already on the disc anyway. It's actually a lot more resources to rip that out. So that's one area of DLC. The other area that you'll often see is like this was never in the game, but now that we've got the time and extra resources that we can focus on this narrow slice, right? This thing that we said, we're not gonna be able to do that because it would be way too hard to do while we're making everything else, right? Earlier Arseny talked about how you already did Kingmaker, so all of the systems that were built for Kingmaker you can use. Well, not all. Some you're going to be reworking and chucking out. That's the other part of game development. You never know what you can actually use in the next game. But you have those things that, like, it was just too much work to do that and the rest of the game. And that's where you see a lot of other DLC come from. And in both instances, it's basically, there's this thing called the Mythical Man month, or I think I'm getting the term wrong. Basically, it's that notion of it takes 9 months for a baby to be born. It does not take for one woman to birth one baby. You can't have one baby born to 9 women, each only pregnant for a month.
So far.
Well, yeah. So that kind of as an inside perspective on where a lot of DLC will come from, just so that folks kind of know what that process looks like. And it's the same thing in TTRPGs, right? There's some stuff that's like this would be really great to also include, but there's some obvious problems with it, and we don't have the bandwidth to figure out how do we plug all these holes and make it work cohesively with the rest of the system. So instead, we're going to put that on the back burner, get the stuff we can sorted, and then when we have more time and can actually think through it, work on it.
I'll give you a good example of that. That's a great point, Don. A good example of that in Savage Pathfinder is we have class edges for each class from Pathfinder, and we only have time and ability to get one class edge per seasoned, veteran, and heroic rank for now. But in a future book, we'll give you other options for your follow-on class edges. But we just can't fit them in a 256-page book, which is what we need to make for this particular product. Nor do we have enough time or people to test all of those different class edges yet. So that's how a lot of this comes to be. In video games, I've seen a lot of different approaches, some of which were terrible. One big MMO I was working on, we spent 2 straight days, 16 hours going through every feature in the game because we knew we didn't have enough money to finish. So we had to go through every single feature and figure out what to cut. And one of the things that got cut was guilds and prioritized matchmaking, right? And in an MMO with PvP play, Those are things you really can't do without. And we all knew it, but that's what the developer who was putting, $70 million into this project could afford. And we knew what would happen, and it did. We got to that point and it didn't feel right without it. So they added another $10 million in another 3 months. But if we had planned for that in the beginning, it would have been much better than planning not to do it and then tacking it on, right? I think good DLC is I think the Total War series. I'm a huge Total War player. I play it all the time. The Warhammer ones, where they come out with new races. I think those are good because they feel like a thing. I want the Ogre Kingdoms for Warhammer 3, Total War Warhammer 3 when it comes out. That will feel like almost like a new game or a new experience for me, right? And I'm willing to pay for that. If it just added on, sieges or something, that would have felt incomplete had they not been in the original.
All right, so we're hitting towards the end of our time here. I kind of want to, because this is my favorite question to ask developers of any kind. What are you most excited for folks to get their hands on when the game releases? That's for everybody. So whoever wants to start with that. I know that's sometimes a question that you have to think about a little bit because it's not something you're always super focused on.
Let's let Arseny and Lisa go first.
Do you have something?
What's going to amaze people when they see it?
I actually have an answer. This is something I call. There is something I call luxury features. What I call a luxury feature is, well, here's an example. An example from an old game called Shin Megami Tensei If, which is a 16-bit dungeon crawler, a really cool urban fantasy / horror game, and there is one boss there as an evil fox spirit. And we're talking about a 16-bit game. Every sprite counts. Every enemy counts. It's for that time it was a lot of money. So that enemy was a spirit of greed, and depending on the number of chests you opened on her level,
Wow.
she would grow more and more powerful. And I thought, well, it has maybe 2, maybe even 3 forms. She has 9 forms. 9 different forms. Would any one player see all of them? Never. But this is the kind of feature that is absolutely an excess. But it is something that a player runs into and just thinks, wow, they went to all of the trouble to make this one super cool moment. In Kingmaker, I won't spoil it, but a kind of luxury feature is if you do some really specific things, if you spare some characters, you can get a bonus companion for just one last chapter.
Cool.
A companion is really expensive to make. And that person has a complete set of voice calls, mechanics, his own model, everything, just for one chapter, just for players who get there.
A secret one.
Yes, almost a secret one, just to blow the mind of those who do that. So I actually did something like that, and I won't spoil it, but there is a very, very specific things you can do in a certain combination of romance and mythic path that would, I think, maybe 5% of the players would find it, but I think it would blow their minds when they do.
Well, that's amazing. I'm going to look for it now.
Yeah, you heard it. If you're in this chat, if you when the game releases, be on the lookout to I also absolutely love stuff like that. That's the, you fall in love with something, you're like, oh, if we did this one thing, that would be so immeasurably cool. Now I just got to convince everybody else on the team it's worth all the effort to put it in for that small number of players.
And I
Yep.
personally cannot wait people to dive into the whole story, because as community managers, we have to make usual updates, dev diaries, show things, give people something to see, and we constantly go and up at the point where we'd love to show you this particular thing, but it leads to some spoilers, or developers don't want to show it yet, and there are so many such things.
Basically,
We
you're
really-
tired of keeping secrets.
Huh?
You're tired of keeping secrets.
Yes. Oh my god, there are so many of them. And I always, I'm really proud of our our narrative designers team and designers in a whole. So there are so many things we'd like people to see and to learn and to dive in, and that will be really, we'll be really happy when they will get to it. So that's why it's rather difficult for me to bring out something in particular.
Nothing
it's your turn.
replaces that feeling of you've made a thing and now people are experiencing that thing. And I mean that's basically why we all do this, right? For the amount of work that goes into it and how immeasurably difficult this stuff is, it's the only thing that makes it worthwhile.
Absolutely. I must say, I'm reading our Discord server. I'm reading the feedback, and it gives me so much power to keep doing what I'm doing. Just seeing people talking about that stuff, it's an amazing feeling. Well, now it's your turn.
We have
What-
really active and great Discord server.
What do you what you can't wait for people to see in your game?
I mean, the obvious answer is the same that you just gave. Of I just want to see people play it. But particularly for me, I spent a lot of time working on a lot of the new powers and a lot of the conversion from Pathfinder spells into powers in Savage Pathfinder, and so I am super excited to see folks get their hands on that, and then there's that point where I'm excited for them to get their hands on it, and I hope they like it. I really, really hope they like it.
I'm excited. For years ago when we did Necessary Evil, which is our supers campaign, people said, well, Savage Worlds can't do supers because the scale's just too small. Well, we did it, and it's my favorite super system.
I
think
love
so.
it. We've tried
played
it.
it.
Yeah, we've played it sometime. Unfortunately, we had to stop because of the pandemic. But I loved how it's turned out to be like a comic book, like a
Yep.
cartoon. We had such a cartoonish party, and it was really fun.
Well, that's fantastic. I will send you Necessary Evil 3 if you remind me after the program. It's rough right now, but it's pretty neat. It's the Guardians of the Galaxy cosmic version, right? Very high power level.
I mean, you'll. Of course, the setting itself means you will be a cartoonish, evil character, but I love how it actually plays like a comic book or a cartoon.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big comic book nerd, so I wanted it to be, I wanted it to be great, and I think it is. So people have often said that they don't think Savage Worlds can do dungeon crawls. So I think you're going to see. So dungeon crawl is a tricky term, right? Because there's dungeon crawl and then there's D20 dungeon crawl, right? Mm-hmm. So I think with Savage Pathfinder, we've actually captured both. And I think when people see that and see how it all comes together with class edges, the new combat options we've got, new power modifiers, so everything is essentially the same, but these small little changes give it a completely different feel. And we've been able to capture the essence of D20 Pathfinder classes, which are so cool, and make them work with the free-form level as you want system of Savage Worlds. And I think it works great. And I'm not taking credit for that. We've got an amazing team. Chris Warner started us down the path. Carl Kiesler was involved. I got to name him real quick. Don has been instrumental in helping shape the systems. Mike Barbeau has done an amazing job on the encounters. And then Simon Lucas and I, we come along, and Clint Black, we come along and give our input. But I think when people see how this all comes together, they're going to say, wow, this feels like Pathfinder and Savage Worlds. And that's awesome. Now, Arseny, you've kind of challenged me here today. You've said that Savage Worlds probably wouldn't be great for a Forbidden Lands kind of campaign. So you know what I'm going to have to work on next.
He's trolling you.
No, I'm not trolling. What I'm saying is I was really excited about the Savage Pathfinder precisely because when I looked at it, it seemed like it was something that I tried to homebrew and failed. And
it's been a challenge for sure.
Now I get to see your take on it, on
Yep.
that exact thing that I tried and didn't manage to do.
Well, I'm still going to come over and run a exploration game for you, I think.
I'll contact you, okay?
Sure.
I have another
I'll
question.
bring the game, you bring the vodka, all right?
Okay, I don't drink, but I can bring the balalaika. I have another quick question. You said that you don't do CRs for the monsters. And this is actually something I've been having a problem with as a DM. Can you tell me, why don't you give your monsters, your player characters have these ranks? You have newbie, seasoned.
Here's why. Let me anticipate your question since we're out of time here.
For listeners, I just have problems with matching monsters with players.
Right. So part of the answer is we don't want you to. We want the monsters to be whatever they're going to be, and the players have to deal with it. It's a philosophical aspect of we want it to be like the real world. If a gang has 10 guys in it, it has 10 guys. Now, I realize that doesn't really help create an encounter. So
you mean that you want an encounter to be a surprise for the DM as much as the players?
Well,
You have to.
So, for example, let's take a Thieves Guild in a standard fantasy campaign, okay? That Thieves Guild in real life might have 300 people inside. But if I were going to design it in a game that strictly enforces challenge ratings, I would have to segment it or reduce the numbers or whatever I would need to do to make it appropriate for my party's level, okay? But I would rather it be whatever it should be in real life, and then the players have to deal with it as they might in real life. Now, again, I realize that doesn't really help, especially a new player who's trying to figure things out. So we have some advice in our game mastering section of about how many wild cards and extras you might want to put against your players. In Pathfinder, we have a little surprise that you'll see soon. We're still working on, so I don't want to talk about it too much just yet. But we will also have variable power levels of some creatures and some advice on how to use them. And then finally, I ran a fun little fantasy game not too long ago called Silver Age Sentinels, which was not the superhero game of the same name, but was instead about a bunch of old adventurers who were called back to a dungeon crawl. They were in their 60s, right? And everybody had to take the elderly hindrance, and they were
Coin the Barbarian.
Yes, kind of like King Conan, but these guys were not in great shape.
Coin the Barbarian.
I don't know that one. Oh, I thought you
Terry
meant
Pratchett wrote a book about that, about the
I
old
don't know that
barbarian.
one. I'm going to look that up now. That sounds great. But
it is great.
For example, in that adventure, my characters were all heroic level, okay, heroic rank, and they wound up fighting a bunch of the snake men, not Nagas, D20, Yanti. Okay, they fought a bunch of Yanti, and they're just archers, just base level archers. But they were on a ledge that my players couldn't get to. So challenge rating wise, they would have been very low compared to my party. But the situation in the encounter makes it much more difficult, right? So while we can give a rating based on a creature's statistics, and that's fine, I think that the situation, the encounter, the makeup of the party, all of those things make those numbers kind of bullshit anyway. So we have better advice for players for Pathfinder because we know Pathfinder players, D20 players are used to it and will need that. So we have more of it. But in general, it's just a Shane thing. I just want it to be tough. I want it to be whatever it is, and you got to deal with it.
You know, that's a curious thing. You keep talking about how Savage Worlds is a gritty and murderous system, but I never saw it like that. Actually, first, I love the idea of shaken. Some people hate it, I know. And also thanks for nerfing the shaken condition in the newest edition. But when you watch a movie, you see the hero and villains do poof, poof, poof.
Right.
One hits another in the jaw, he turns back, then stands back again with no actual trauma taken. This is, I think, what shaken represents, that you have taken a hit, but you have not been injured.
Right. It's losing a few hit points.
No, it's not losing anything because hit points is attrition. Hit points
True.
is attrition.
It's the game equivalent for us.
Every trauma is kind of a plot point. You actually got wounded. You have that wound. And speaking of dying, well, personally, in my game, heroes don't die. Heroes don't die.
It's so
actually
difficult to say goodbye to your character. You've put
look.
so
I
much.
just hate the idea of random dice roll making a character you've spent 2 years with go away. However, I've played a lot of Seventh Seer, and there it's actually rule that is set in stone that a hero or a villain, which is something like wild card in Savage World, can only be deliberately killed by a hero or a villain in a dramatic manner. However, you said that a hero still can be killed by a bunch of goblins. Well, maybe not killed. A hero might be beaten, captured. A comic book hero, a Superman kind of hero, can be happen to be beaten by goblins and put into some Ruby Goldberg machine that would soak him in half, and it wouldn't be the end of the game. It would be a new plot point.
And that's why we have incapacitated instead of dead, right? We do have bleeding out, but we also have the setting rule heroes never die. So exactly. And by the way, 7C is a great game written by our buddy John Wick, who lives about an hour that way. Fantastic game.
And also, you don't have to kill the extras too.
Right. Sure.
You hit them, they're out of the game, but it's up to you to say if you have eviscerated them viciously or just bonked them on the head.
Exactly. Yep.
So
All
it's
right.
less of a...
You've been speaking previously about Blades in the Dark, and by the way, it was so difficult not to kill somebody.
Yes,
and
yes.
it's crucial. And
yes, in Blades in the Dark, it actually heavily discourages murdering.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Where can we find you folks next on Twitch?
Well, we'll have... I'm not so sure, but maybe we'll just continue talking at our channel right now. What you've been suggesting it before.
I don't know. Do you have some ideas?
Well, we'll see.
Well,
but
anyway.
definitely we'll have one more stream this Friday. Yep.
All right, and that is Alcat Games on Twitch. So go ahead and follow them if you want to find out the next thing that's coming up for Wrath. We will be live on the Peg Inc. Twitch channel this Thursday, 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that's 4 p.m. Eastern, where I will be talking about taking Pathfinder spells and converting them into Savage Worlds powers. And so if you show up into the chat and you've got some Pathfinder spells that you want to know, how are we going to do this in Savage Worlds, come and check it out. And with that, is there anything you want to say about the community quest before we show the video?
Oh,
Thank you so much for having us. Just
Oh, yeah.
thank you so much. Everybody, go and back the Kickstarter right now. It's worth it, I promise you.
And go and wish list Wrath on Steam.
Do it.
Done.
Thank you very much.
The community quest.
Well, it's I'm not so much time left to tell you.
We have a community quest that you can take part in.
Okay, if I have a couple more minutes to tell about that.
Yeah.
The thing is, we didn't want it to just make a couple of trailers and like usual go to media and that's it. We wanted to make something really interesting about Wrath of the Righteous before their release and really engage our community. That's why we came up with a community quest, which will be like a series of events for our community on our different social networks. We already had the first part on Twitch as an interactive game. That's actually a whole story, and we have a separate trailer with this story. And then, we had this Switch game. Then we'll have another event on some other platform, on maybe Twitter or something else. And after this series of events, during this series of events, our community will have a chance to make some choices. And after all the events are ended, we'll make the final trailer with the final story connected to Wrath of the Righteous, but some side story, you may say, with some hero and his party. We'll see what our community made, basically. So this trailer will be based on these choices made by the community. So we encourage all our viewers to participate. We hope this will be really, really fun.
And with that, we will roll to that trailer.
You should know your enemies. Remember, they are ever near, circling above and stalking below, ready to strike from every shadow, even from within. Their greatest weapon is not their spells, or claws, or swords. It is the strife they sow.